If you take a dark purple-red wine grape and you peel it carefully and squeeze it, the juice that comes out is actually completely clear. It doesn't look like red wine at all.
Yeah, it's a surprising fact for a lot of people.
Right. So, welcome to this deep dive into the fundamental principles of winemaking. We are drawing from a really comprehensive presentation called Winemaking 101, alongside an incredibly practical guide called Precision Winemaking at Your Fingertips.
And that second one was created by Michael and Sharon Orton.
Exactly. Today's mission is to basically bypass all the overwhelming technical jargon. We want to help you, the listener, understand exactly what it takes to turn a pile of freshly harvested grapes into a properly aged, delicious bottle of wine.
Right, and it's important to remember that winemaking is often romanticized, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But at its core, it is, a biological and chemical process.
And I'm coming at this as a beginner, so I'm ready to ask all the practical questions you might have if you were trying to do this in your own garage.
And I'll be guiding you through the mechanics. Once you understand the underlying rules, it becomes incredibly straightforward. Actually, that fact you started with about the clear grape juice is the perfect place to begin.
Because it dictates the whole difference between red and white wine, right?
Precisely. If the juice is clear, the color has to come from somewhere else.
And that somewhere is the skin?
Right. All the color, as well as the textural elements called tannins, which are the compounds that give you that dry, gripping sensation in your mouth when you drink a heavy red, they're located entirely in the skin of the grape.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So to make red wine, you crush the grapes and let the clear juice ferment while it is actively sitting on and mixing with those red skins.
Okay, so that extended contact is how the color and structure are actually extracted.
Exactly. You're soaking the skins in the juice.
Which means white wine has to be a completely different physical process, like from day one.
It is. For white wine, you crush the grapes and immediately press the juice away from the skins.
So no skin contact at all.
None. Only that extracted clear juice goes into your fermentation vessel. White wine is fermented completely off the skins.
I see. So once we have our juice ready to go, before we even think about fermentation, we have to look at the chemistry.
Right, the numbers game.
Yeah, and both of our sources emphasize that this starts with a measurement called Brix. What exactly is Brix?
Brix is simply a measurement of sugar in the grapes. When you measure Brix, you are figuring out exactly how much potential alcohol you can generate.
Because sugar is what the yeast will consume, right?
Exactly. The fundamental mathematical rule you want to remember here is that 1 degree of Brix will result in approximately 0.6% alcohol by volume, or ABV.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this right. If I'm looking at a batch of fresh juice, is measuring Brix basically like checking the fuel gauge of the grape before I start the engine?
That's a great analogy, yeah.
So the sugar is the fuel, and the yeast turns that fuel into engine power, which in this case is the alcohol.
That's a really helpful way to visualize it. You are literally measuring the size of your fuel tank.
Mm.
And, depending on the style of wine you are making, you want a different amount of fuel.
Right, like a heavy red versus a light white.
Exactly. For a robust red wine, winemakers generally look for a harvest between 23 and 26 Brix.
And if we follow that 0.6 multiplier you mentioned.
Right, that yields a final wine sitting between 13 and 15.5% ABV.
Got it.
For reds, you also look for a pH level between 3.4 and 3.7 just to ensure the chemistry is stable.
I imagine white wines require a completely different starting point, given that they're usually much lighter.
They do. White grapes are usually picked earlier in the season, targeting a lower 20 to 23 Brix.
So less sugar, less alcohol.
Exactly. This yields a lighter wine, usually between 11 and 13.75% EDD, and the target pH is also lower, usually 3.2 to 3.4.
Which is what gives white wine that characteristic crisp, refreshing acidity, I assume.
You nailed it. That lower pH equals higher, crisper acid.
Okay, let's ground this in reality for a minute. Say I'm standing in my garage, and I'm thinking about making a batch of wine for you, me, and some friends to drink.
Okay, a nice weekend project.
Yeah, but how much raw material do I actually need? Like, what does the physical scale of this project look like?
Well, we can break the yields down to the bottle level. A single standard bottle of wine contains the juice of about 2.4 pounds, or roughly 39 ounces of grapes.
Okay, 2.4 pounds per bottle.
Right. So a very common and manageable starting point for a home vintner is a standard 5-gallon batch.
5 gallons. How many bottles is that?
5 gallons translates to 2 cases, so 24 bottles of wine.
Nice.
But to achieve that, you're going to need to start with 80 pounds of fresh grapes.
Wow, 80 pounds sounds like a massive amount.
It sounds like a lot, but it's really just a couple of large harvest crates.
Okay, so to process 80 pounds into 5 gallons of wine, what kind of equipment do I actually need to buy? I'm hoping I don't need like a commercial facility.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You need a surprisingly basic suite of tools. First, you need a large, food-grade plastic fermentation bucket for the initial primary stage.
Just a bucket.
Just a bucket, yeah. You will also need a carboy.
What's a carboy?
It's a large glass or plastic jug with a very narrow neck. And it's fitted with a simple device called an airlock.
Okay, and what does the airlock do?
The airlock is crucial because it allows carbon dioxide to escape during fermentation without letting any outside oxygen back in.
I see. I also see a siphon hose on the equipment list in our sources. Why is a siphon hose?
Well,
Like, why can't I just pour the juice from the bucket into the carboy when it's time to move it?
because pouring creates splashing, and splashing introduces massive amounts of oxygen into the wine.
And oxygen is bad.
In the early stages, a little oxygen is fine, but later on, oxygen is the absolute enemy. It will oxidize and spoil your wine.
Oh, so it ruins it.
Yeah, it turns it brown and gives it this flat, nutty flavor. A siphon hose lets you transfer the liquid gently, keeping oxygen exposure to a minimum.
Got it. What else do I need?
You'll also need a long stirrer, bottles, corks, and eventually a destemmer and a basket press to separate the skins from the juice.
Though I've heard those larger pieces, like the destemmer and the press, can usually just be rented from supply stores for the weekend rather than bought outright.
That's right. No need to buy those at first. I would also highly recommend picking up two optional but invaluable precision tools.
Okay, what are they?
A digital pH meter and either a hydrometer or a refractometer.
A hydrometer. That measures density, right?
Exactly. It measures specific gravity, which is essentially the density of the liquid. As the sugar gets converted into alcohol, the liquid becomes less dense.
Oh, I see. So tracking that specific gravity tells you exactly how far along your fermentation is.
You got it.
Okay, that brings up a very practical hurdle for the beginner.
Looks like.
If I have my hydrometer and my buckets ready, but I don't live on a vineyard and I can't grow my own fruit, where on earth do I source 80 pounds of quality wine grapes?
It's easier than you might think, honestly. Dedicated winemaking supply stores. Places like Grass Valley Brewmeister or the Sacramento Homebrew Outlet mentioned in our sources.
They sell fresh grapes.
Yeah, they often coordinate large community grape sales during the fall harvest. You can also connect with local winemaking clubs who buy in bulk from estate vineyards.
That makes sense.
Or, if you want to eliminate the agricultural guesswork entirely, you can start with commercial wine kits.
Oh, like prepackaged juice.
Exactly. These kits come with pre-balanced juice and yield exactly 23 liters, which is about 6 gallons. They are a fantastic way to learn the physical mechanics of the process before dealing with raw fruit.
Okay, so assuming I've sourced my 80 pounds of raw grapes, let's walk through what I'm actually doing with them.
Let's do it.
I'm staring at these crates in my garage. What is the very first thing I have to do on day one to make sure this doesn't just turn into a giant bucket of mold?
Day one is purely about preparation and sanitation. You pick or receive your grapes, remove the stems, and lightly crush the fruit into your primary bucket.
Okay, crush them up.
At this point, what you have is called the must. That's the industry term for the unfermented mixture of juice, skins, and seeds.
The must, got it.
You'll add specific maceration enzymes to this must. Think of these enzymes as microscopic biological scissors.
Microscopic scissors.
Yeah, they break down the cell walls of the grapes to help release more juice and color. Crucially, though, you must also add a precise dose of SO2 or sulfites.
Wait, just to clarify, we're adding sulfites before we even add the yeast.
Yes, the grapes come in from the field covered in wild, unpredictable bacteria and wild yeasts.
Oh, right, from the vineyard.
Exactly. The initial sulfite addition sanitizes the must, knocking back all those unwanted organisms to create a clean slate. This way, your chosen commercial yeast doesn't have any competition.
That makes a lot of sense. Which brings us to day 2, where we actually introduce our yeast and start making alcohol.
Right. You start by hydrating your dry commercial yeast in warm water, usually between 80 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Waking them up.
It's exactly like gently waking up a dormant organism. But yeast cannot survive, or do its job, on sugar alone. You must introduce YAN.
YAN. What does that stand for?
It stands for yeast assimilable nitrogen.
Let's break YAN down for a beginner. Are we essentially just talking about the vital vitamins and organic nutrients the yeast requires to build strong cell walls and thrive in the juice?
That's exactly it. They're vitamins for the yeast. However, The sources give a very specific warning here.
Okay, what is it?
You must avoid adding DAP, which is an inorganic nitrogen, during this initial hydration phase.
Why is that?
The yeast needs organic amino acids first to build its strength before it can handle inorganic nitrogen like DAP. If you feed it inorganic nitrogen too early, it can actually shock the yeast.
So we feed them the organic nutrients, pitch the yeast into the must, and we arrive at days 3 through 5.
The active phase.
Right. This is when active fermentation is fully underway. What does that actually look like in the bucket?
If you look in the bucket during a red wine fermentation, it looks violent.
Yeah.
Yeah, carbon dioxide is being rapidly produced by the yeast as they consume the sugar. This gas bubbles up and physically pushes all the solid grape skins to the top of the bucket.
Oh, so they float to the top.
Right, forming a thick, dense layer known as the cap. Your job during these days is to perform cap punching.
Cap punching, like literally punching it.
Pretty much. You have to physically push that solid raft of skins back down into the liquid, usually twice a day, to keep it wet.
Because if that cap dries out, sitting exposed to the air, I assume it just becomes a breeding ground for mold and bacteria.
Exactly. It will completely spoil the whole batch.
Good to know.
Now, this 3 to 5 day window is also when you have to apply the 1/3 rule for feeding your yeast.
Okay, the 1/3 rule, what's that?
You mentioned earlier that we eventually need to add that inorganic nitrogen, the DAP. The rule states that you must add this final nutrient before 1/3 of your starting sugar is depleted.
Before 1/3 is gone, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the logic of this rule. If I feed the yeast this inorganic nutrient too late in the fermentation process, is it essentially like handing a marathon runner a massive heavy steak dinner a mile before they cross the finish line?
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Like they physically can't digest it and it just sits in their stomach causing severe problems.
That is exactly what happens. As the alcohol levels rise later in the fermentation process, the yeast's transport proteins, the mechanisms they use to consume food, become inhibited by the alcohol.
So they're too drunk to eat.
Basically, yes. They physically cannot absorb the inorganic nitrogen anymore. So if you add it after the 1/3 mark, it just sits in the wine, completely unused by your yeast.
And what happens to it then?
It becomes a free buffet for spoilage bacteria, particularly a notoriously difficult one called Brettanomyces, which will make your wine smell like a barnyard or a sweaty saddle.
Definitely not the tasting notes we were going for.
Not at all.
So we feed them on time, keep the cap punched down, and we hit days 6 through 10.
Right. In this final stretch, you monitor the temperature closely. Eventually, the yeast will consume all the available sugar and stop generating CO2.
And since there's no gas pushing the skins up,
Exactly. Without that gas constantly pushing upwards, the cap of skins will naturally sink back down to the bottom.
so that's the visual cue.
That is your visual cue that primary fermentation is finished. You press the liquid off the skins, leave the solids behind, and move your new wine into the glass carboy for aging.
That standard timeline sounds very manageable if everything goes according to the textbook.
It usually does, but not always.
Right, because grapes are agricultural products, and nature doesn't always deliver perfect chemistry. What happens when the fruit you buy is entirely out of balance?
This is where you transition from hoping for the best to actually managing the process. The Orton's Guide provides a brilliant case study of this.
Ah, yes. The Big Zin Challenge.
Yes, they call it the Big Zin
I
Challenge.
love this example from the sources. So the Ordens arranged to receive 500 pounds of Zinfandel grapes, aiming for a harvest under 24 bricks.
Which is a normal target for a red.
Right. But when they got to the vineyard, the yield had ballooned to over 1,000 pounds. And much more concerning, once they crushed the grapes, the juice soaked out to a massive 28 bricks.
Yeah, 28 bricks is huge.
Why is 28 bricks such a disaster, though? Doesn't more sugar just mean you get a wine with a higher alcohol content?
You'd think so, but it's a disaster because of something called osmotic pressure.
Osmotic pressure.
Yeah, when the sugar concentration in the juice is that incredibly high, it actually draws water out of the yeast cells. It dehydrates and paralyzes them.
Wow, it literally sucks them dry.
Exactly. If the yeast gets paralyzed before it finishes consuming all that sugar, the fermentation simply stops halfway through.
Oh, I see.
You experience what's called a stuck fermentation, leaving you with a flawed, syrupy sweet wine that is highly susceptible to spoiling.
So how did they salvage 1,000 pounds of overly sweet Zinfandel?
They turned to their digital winemaking calculator dashboard. Using the water addition calculator, they ran the math.
They calculated how much water to add.
Right, they found they needed to add 5.8 gallons of pure water to dilute their 35 gallons of Zinfandel must. That brought it from that dangerous 28 bricks down to a safe 24 bricks.
Okay, but you can't just dump all that water in at once, can you?
No, when adding water, you always follow the 75% rule. You calculate the total water needed, but you only add 75% of it at first.
And then what?
You stir the must thoroughly, take a new bricks reading to verify your math, and only then add the remainder.
I have to pause here because pouring water into wine feels entirely counterintuitive.
It does feel wrong, yeah.
If I pour almost 6 gallons of pure water into my grape juice, are I just watering down the final flavor, the color, and the body? Won't it just taste like grape water?
It's a very logical concern, and honestly, if they had just dumped water in, that's exactly what would have happened.
So how did they avoid that?
To prevent that, they employed a classic technique called the saignée method. It's a French term meaning to bleed. Before they added the 5.8 gallons of water, they bled off, or physically removed, 5.8 gallons of the initial free-run pink juice from the vat.
Ah, I see. So they removed liquid but left all the solid red skins behind in the vat.
Precisely. By removing 5.8 gallons of juice, they artificially increased the ratio of skins to the remaining liquid.
So it's hyper concentrated.
Exactly. When they subsequently added the 5.8 gallons of water back in, the overall volume returned to normal. But that highly concentrated amount of skins ensured the final red wine retained its deep color, dense tannins, and rich flavor.
Wow, the Saignée method perfectly counteracted the dilution. That's brilliant.
That's a great technique.
But they had to fix the acidity too, right? Because adding water also dilutes the natural acid.
Yes, the dilution threatened to shift the wine's pH to a dangerous 3.85. Using the acid additions calculator, they knew to add exactly 394.4 grams of tartaric acid to pull the pH back down to a stable 3.55.
It's amazing how precise you can be. And they didn't waste anything either. Our sources noted they took that 5.8 gallons of bled-off juice and fermented it separately to create a beautiful rosé.
Nothing goes to waste.
Right. They also took some of the original high-sugar must to create an 18% ABV dessert wine.
Yeah, utilizing a tool called Pearson's Square to calculate the exact amount of high-proof spirits needed to halt the yeast prematurely.
It's a fascinating look at how understanding the math allows you to pivot. They turned one massive agricultural problem into 3 distinct successful wines.
It really is all about having the right tools.
So let's assume we've balanced our chemistry and finished our primary fermentation. The wine now moves into the final crucial steps, aging and stabilization.
Right, and when you think of aging, you usually think of oak.
Definitely. Big wooden barrels.
And oak does impart lovely flavors like vanillin, but its real purpose is structural. The wood introduces specific esters and tannins into the wine that add body and help smooth out the harsh, aggressive edges of a young fermentation.
But if I'm doing a 5-gallon batch in my garage, I obviously can't use a traditional 60-gallon oak barrel.
You don't need to. The industry makes excellent alternatives for home vintners.
Like what?
You can introduce oak chips, small roasted cubes, spirals, or long wooden staves directly into your glass carboy.
Oh, that's convenient.
Very. They provide the exact same chemical benefits as a full barrel, perfectly scaled down for your 5-gallon volume.
Now, during this aging process in the carboy, the sources emphasize managing the empty space at the top of the vessel, which they call ullage. What is ullage and why is it dangerous?
Ullage is simply the headspace between the top of the wine and the stopper. Liquid naturally evaporates over time.
Even in a sealed container.
Well, especially in wood. In fact, traditional wooden barrels lose about 10% of their volume annually just to evaporation.
Wow, 10% is a lot.
It is. If you let that empty headspace grow, it fills with oxygen. And as we discussed earlier, oxygen will spoil the wine.
Right, it's the enemy.
So a winemaker must frequently top up their vessels, adding small amounts of similar wine to keep the liquid level pushed right up to the stopper, entirely eliminating that dangerous oxygen gap.
Okay, so keep it topped up. And the very last element of aging before bottling is managing your sulfites. The Ordnance dashboard features an SO2 calculator because, as they stress, sulfite additions should never be guessed.
Never. You have to calculate them based on the wine's specific pH, its alcohol level, and its storage temperature.
And what's the goal of that calculation?
The goal is to hit your molecular SO2 targets. This represents the amount of active free sulfite required to keep the wine microbiologically safe in the bottle.
And there are industry standards for this, right?
Yes, the industry standard target is 0.8 milligrams per liter for white wines and rosés, but it's a lower 0.5 milligrams per liter for red wines.
Wait, why the difference? If white wine is generally lighter, why does it require a higher target of 0.8, while a heavy red wine only needs 0.5?
It perfectly circles back to our very first lesson about the grape skins.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because red wine is fermented sitting on the skins, it absorbs huge amounts of natural tannins and polyphenols. And those do what? Those skin compounds actually act as natural antioxidants and preservatives.
Oh, I see.
White wine, which is pressed immediately and fermented as pure juice, entirely lacks those natural defenses from the skins. Because it's more vulnerable, white wine requires a slightly higher threshold of added sulfites to achieve the same level of long-term protection.
It's incredible how that one initial decision on day one ripples all the way through the chemistry of the wine months later.
It really is all connected.
So, to summarize what we've covered today, good winemaking relies on mastering a few foundational rules. You ferment reds on the skins to get the color and tannins, and whites off the skins.
Exactly.
You have to manage the chronological timeline, especially understanding when to feed your yeast so they don't stall out. And most importantly, you have to use precision tools to adjust your sugar, acid, and sulfites when nature inevitably throws a curveball at you.
When you understand the why behind these steps, rather than just blindly following a recipe, you bypass years of trial and error. You can produce quality wine consistently right from your very first harvest.
Before we wrap up this masterclass, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought drawn from the source materials regarding global geography.
It's a really interesting point to consider.
It is. Traditionally, the world's viable wine-producing regions sit strictly between 30 and 50 degrees latitude in both the northern and southern hemispheres.
And this narrow band exists because vines require very specific sunlight and winter temperatures to survive and produce balanced fruit.
It's a very delicate geographical balance.
It really is.
But as you consider the mechanics we have discussed today, ponder how global climate change might shift those traditional latitude zones. As temperatures consistently rise in these historic regions, higher sugar levels and massive Brix readings at harvest, like the Orton's Big Zin Challenge, will inevitably become the standard, rather than a rare exception.
Which means we'll be seeing a lot more high-sugar grapes.
Exactly. This suggests that the ability for a home vintner or even a commercial winery to confidently use digital precision tools for water dilution, acid adjustment, and complex chemistry management won't just be a helpful trick to save a tough vintage. It will be an absolute necessity for the future of winemaking everywhere.